This is our first in a series of books in the Bible in 5 minutes. And we're starting with Genesis. Genesis means origin. This is the start of creation. It's the start of humans. It's the start of sin and brokenness. It's the start of the Jewish community. And so it dates to the second millennia BC is when we're going to place a lot of this. And there's two sections. There's prehistory in the first 11 chapters, and then from 12 through 50 is the story of the community and the forming and building of that. And this is going to orient us to the rest of the Bible, right? With God as the universal creator, that means the people of God have something to say to all of creation. And so, again, we're trying to place this, think of the arc of God's actions as one story through the whole Bible, and it's starting here in Genesis. And we start with creation, and creation happens out of nothing. And so that's important because it means the world is different than God. They're separate. And yet, here's God being involved with creation. So God then creates the world. He creates animals and plant life, and then creates humans. In the image of God, they are created. And then what happens is Adam and Eve want to be like God, and so there's sin and brokenness is introduced. And it's introduced both in the vertical relationship between humans and God, and then it's introduced between humans as well. But isn't it interesting that as soon as sin is introduced, that God provides clothes for Adam and Eve are naked and ashamed, but then God provides clothing. So there's a fundamental shift in the relationship between humans and God. But God immediately begins to try and restore that relationship. And we see the horizontal brokenness in the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain kills his brother Abel. Other stories in this prehistory section include the Tower of Babel, Noah and the flood, and then chapter 12 we start the second section where we're talking about community with the call of Abram, who will later be renamed Abraham. And so in chapter 15, then God makes this covenant. God promises an heir to Abram despite his advanced age. And then God has this covenant where God passes through these animals that have been torn in two. And in the culture, traditionally, the weaker party would have passed through, saying, may I become like these animals torn in two if I break the covenant. But here it's God who is passing through, and God is taking on the responsibility for keeping the covenant. And so we're relying on God and on God's faithfulness. And then, so the birth of Isaac, the promised heir, takes place. And then there's a section where Abraham travels with Isaac onto a mountain, and Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac, but God stops, and then God provides an alternative sacrifice. And this is looking ahead to Christ, who will be sacrificed. And God is saying God is willing to go farther than God is going to ask humans to do. And then there's Jacob and Esau, these brothers, and Esau sells his birthright to Jacob in a moment of desperation and in hunger, teaching us about the danger of our appetites if we don't control them. And then so Jacob tricks Isaac, and then Jacob runs for his life, and he's out in the wilderness, and he has this dream where there's angels ascending and descending. It's this dream of Jacob's ladder. And it's looking ahead to Christ, who is the ladder. Christ will say, he is the bridge, and the angels will be ascending and descending through Christ, who makes it possible, who restores the relationship. It's looking ahead. Jacob's dream here is looking ahead to Christ, foreshadowing Christ who will come to heal. And so we have Jacob then wrestling with God, and then Jacob's sons, one of which is Joseph. Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers. Sold into slavery, ends up in Egypt. Joseph can interpret dreams. And so Joseph, through some twists and turns, ends up interpreting Pharaoh's dream, which is predicting a famine. And then Joseph helps prepare for the famine. So not only is Egypt saved, but the whole world starts coming to Egypt for grain, and Joseph's family comes. There's this incredible reconciliation. And then Joseph's family stays, and what we have then is the beginning of the community in Egypt, looking ahead to the book of Exodus, which comes next after Genesis.